Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're traveling back in time.
Right, but we aren't going to some dusty ancient ruin or a misty mountaintop.
No, not at all. We are going to Midtown Manhattan.
Specifically, we are going to an office building. It is August 16th, 1967.
Yeah, right around 11:00 a.m. on a Wednesday morning.
And I want you to really picture the scene here. It's the Mad Men era.
Oh, absolutely. You've got the heavy oak desks, the smell of stale cigarette smoke, typewriter ribbons.
The rotary phones ringing off the hook, yeah.
Exactly. This is the office of Frederick Fell, who was a major publisher in New York City at the time.
It's a place of commerce. I mean, deals are being made, contracts are being signed. It is literally the last place on earth you would expect to find a ghost.
Right. And yet that is exactly who is running the meeting.
It's so wild to think about.
Because sitting across the desk from Frederick Fell is Jane Roberts. But it isn't really Jane.
Right, her eyes are closed behind her glasses. She's rocking slightly.
And the voice coming out of her mouth isn't the voice of a shy writer from Elmira, New York.
No, it's the booming, authoritative voice of a personality calling himself Seth.
This is just one of the most unique moments in the entire Seth Material. We usually see Seth in the living room, right? Surrounded by friends.
Exactly, a very safe, comfortable environment. But here he is in the boardroom. He is facing down a CEO.
And he is negotiating.
He really is. So we are diving deep into session 360 of the early sessions, book 8 of the Seth Material.
The date of record on this one is August 16th, 1967. And folks, if you think business meetings are boring, you have never been to a business meeting with a non-physical entity who describes himself as a cagey old gentleman.
That really is the phrase of the day, isn't it? The cagey old gentleman.
It's perfect. But before we unpack this totally surreal encounter, we do have some important housekeeping.
Right.
This deep dive will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to explore, not to preach.
And we must give credit where it is absolutely due. All the material we are discussing today comes from the Seth Material, which is published by the New Awareness Network.
Yeah, and if you want to follow along, and trust me, reading the original transcripts is a whole other level of experience, you really need to study the Seth Material books. You can visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions.
That's sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions.
Okay, so let's set the stakes here. Why are Jane Roberts and her husband, Robert Butts, who Seth calls Rupert and Joseph in New York City in the first place?
Because they didn't just pop in for a bagel.
No, this was supposed to be their big break. It's the summer of 1967. The world is changing.
Interest in ESP and the paranormal is just exploding at this point.
Right, and Jane Roberts had been booked to appear on the Alan Burke Show on WNEW-TV.
Now, for you listening who maybe didn't grow up in the 60s or aren't familiar with local New York television history, we should probably talk about Alan Burke.
Yeah, was this like going on The Tonight Show?
Not exactly. Alan Burke was, well, let's call him the grandfather of shock jock TV.
Okay, so a bit more aggressive.
Very. He was acerbic, he was confrontational, he didn't invite guests on to politely listen to their theories.
He invited them on to grill them.
Exactly. He wanted to see if they would crack. It was less of a talk show and more of an interrogation.
So Jane is scheduled for this show, and this is national exposure. I mean, this is how you sell books.
Right. You go on TV, you face the fire, you plug the book.
But then, on August 15th, which is the day before this session in the publisher's office, something happens.
Jane pulls the plug.
Just totally backs out.
She cancels the appearance at the absolute last minute.
That is a massive move. I mean, imagine the pressure. The producers are probably screaming. The publisher's probably sweating.
Oh, Frederick Fell is probably having a heart attack.
Right. But Jane just says no.
And this brings us to that moment in the office. It's the next morning. Jane, Robert, and Frederick Fell, the publisher, are sitting together. Jane goes into a trance.
And the very first thing Seth does is address the elephant in the room.
He doesn't apologize either, does he?
Far from it. Seth comes through with incredible energy. Robert Butts actually notes in the margins that Jane's voice was stronger, faster, and more active than usual, though not as loud as it can get.
Right. And Seth says right to the publisher's face, and I quote, "I am very pleased that we did not appear on the TV program, but I knew, you see, that we would not do so."
I knew that we would not do so. That is such a flex.
It really is. He's basically saying, you guys were running around stressing about this, but I already saw the timeline where we didn't go.
It creates this fascinating image of Seth as a protector. He goes on to say that the circumstances of the show were, quote, not those of our choosing or of our liking.
He completely recognized that the environment was hostile.
He actually defines his role here, right? He says he's not a performer.
Exactly. He says he's an educator first and foremost. That is a crucial distinction.
Because a performer just wants the spotlight, regardless of the cost.
But an educator cares about the message. Seth knew that on a show like Alan Burke's, the message would get entirely lost in the circus. So he shut it down.
I just love the idea of a non-physical entity having better media training than most celebrities.
He's like a PR crisis manager.
Yeah. He's like, no, the lighting is bad. The host is toxic. We're passing.
It's exactly that. He is managing the brand. And that segues perfectly into what happens next. Because after he explains why they ditched the TV show, he pivots straight to the business at hand.
He turns to Frederick Fell. Now remember, Fell is the guy publishing Jane's books. He's the money guy.
Right.
And Seth, this disembodied personality, starts thanking him.
He says, I am very pleased to meet you, and since you are the one who published Rupert's book, I thank you.
It's very polite, very formal.
But then comes the pitch.
Oh, man, yes. Seth says, I do suggest, Joseph talking to Robert, that in the future I help our friend arrange his business matters.
Our friend being Jane.
So Seth is literally offering his services as a business manager.
Can you imagine? You're a publisher. You're used to dealing with agents, maybe lawyers, maybe a spouse.
And suddenly the author goes into a trance and the spirit guide says, I'll be handling the contract negotiations from now on.
And Fell doesn't laugh.
Uh-huh.
That's the best part to me. He takes it completely seriously.
He does. They take a brief break, and when they come back, Fell actually asks for clarification. He basically asks, were you serious? You want to arrange the business matters.
And this is where we get the quote of the episode, the line that is just so perfect.
Seth clarifies that he wasn't trying to overstep. He says, I was not presuming to offer you my assistance on such a short acquaintance. Nevertheless, if ever you should desire it, I should certainly be more than willing to comply.
And then he defines himself.
He says, I am a cagey old gentleman.
I am a cagey old gentleman. It's just brilliant.
What does that even mean, really, coming from a multidimensional entity? Cagey usually means shrewd, maybe a little secretive, hard to fool.
I think it implies street smarts. He's telling the publisher, look, I may not have a physical body, but I have been around the block more times than you can count.
Right, like, do not mistake me for some naive spirit who just floats around playing a harp. I know how the world works.
It's a warning shot, isn't it? Don't try to rip off my medium.
Absolutely. He explicitly links it back to the TV show cancellation. He vows to protect Jane at all times, citing the refusal of the TV show as an act of protection.
He is taking credit for the cancellation. He is saying, I have the power to stop things that are bad for us, so let's work together.
And it works. Fell is totally charmed by this approach. He actually asks if Jane would be willing to speak as Seth at a town hall event if he rented the venue.
And Jane and Seth both agree. It's a complete turnaround. Fell went from being a stressed publisher dealing with a nervous author who just canceled a big promotional event to collaborating with a cagey old gentleman who commands respect.
But like any good businessman, Fell needs to verify the goods. He's intrigued, but is he fully convinced?
Right. He decides to test Seth.
And this leads us to the second segment of our deep dive, the psychic detective. Or maybe we should call it the psychic travel agent.
The psychic travel agent works perfectly here.
So the setup is simple. Fell looks across the desk at Jane, who is still in a trance, and asks about his daughter. She's planning a trip to Europe. He asks, will she be safe?
Now, pause here for a second, because if you are a skeptic listening to this, you're thinking, this is a classic cold reading setup.
Oh, 100%.
The most common thing a father worries about is his daughter's safety. A fake psychic would say, yes, I feel a warm light around her. She will be safe. She will meet a handsome man.
Right. Barnum statements, just vague things that apply to literally anyone.
But Seth doesn't do vague. He pauses. He says, these are impressions.
He is signaling that he is switching modes.
Exactly. He is moving from chatty business consultant to remote viewer.
And the data just starts pouring out. It's rapid fire.
First, he gets the itinerary. He says there seems to be a trip with a stopover, a voluntary stopover, before the final destination.
He sees a specific pause in the journey. Then he reassures the father, saying there is safety for the daughter.
Okay, that's the emotional hook. But then the visuals get very specific and very weird.
He starts seeing names or places. He says, gray. He's not sure if it's a name or a color or a place.
Then he sees ages. Someone age 14 connected with someone age 24 or 23.
Then initials, AJ and a C.
And then the scene that really gave me chills when I was reviewing the source material, Seth describes a specific shop in Europe.
A linen shop on a cobblestone street.
Visualize that. A linen shop. Cobblestones. It's so textured.
And he doesn't stop there. He starts seeing numbers. He says the numbers 215 or separately 12 and then 215 connected.
He's struggling to interpret the raw data here. He sees the numerals, but he doesn't know if it's an address, a price tag, a hotel room number.
Which is often a sign of genuine psychic functioning.
Exactly. If he were making it up, he'd just say, she goes to 215 Main Street. But he isn't constructing a neat narrative. He's saying, I see a 2, a 1, and a 5. I don't know what they mean, but they are there.
And then the shopkeeper. He describes the person running this linen shop, run by a white or gray-haired thin person.
And then, this is the detail that really gets me. He says there's something wrong with the left wrist.
The left wrist. Why would you invent that?
It is such a bizarre, granular detail. Something wrong with the left wrist. It implies he is zooming in on a specific person at a specific moment in time and noticing a brace or a scar or a stiffness.
It's incredibly specific. He mentions a separate impression of a WL connection, and then he finishes with the description of a gift. A purchase made of very small matchstick-size pieces of material, not necessarily of wood.
Again, look at the struggle for language. He sees the object, it looks like matchsticks, but he knows the material isn't wood. He's describing the raw sensory input. He isn't labeling it, he's just reporting it.
And there's a connection with a woman with reddish hair.
So Seth finishes this download. He says, I am myself delighted to be here, and suggests a break. Jane wakes up. What does Fell say?
He is stunned. He immediately validates the first specific hit.
Right, Seth had mentioned the woman with reddish hair. Fell confirms right there, on the spot, that his wife, the mother of the daughter taking the trip, has red hair.
Boom. Immediate validation.
And he calls the session remarkable. Robert Butts actually notes that Fell was particularly impressed by the total change in Jane's personality.
Because this wasn't the nervous woman who canceled the TV show the day before. This was the cagey old gentleman.
Now, obviously, the trip to Europe hadn't happened yet, so this was a prediction of future events.
Right. We don't get the follow-up in this specific document about whether she found the shop with the 215 number, but the immediacy of the red hair hit and the specificity of the left wrist really shook the publisher.
It established his authority. Seth proved he wasn't just a voice, he was an eye. He could see things Jane Roberts couldn't possibly know.
But speaking of seeing things, and speaking of things that haven't happened yet, this brings us to the final, and I think the most mind-bending part of today's deep dive.
The Merle Cratsley incident.
That sounds like a Robert Ludlum novel. The Merle Cratsley incident.
It really is a mystery story. But instead of a spy thriller, it's a thriller about the mechanics of prophecy and the nature of time itself.
So we have to step away from the publisher's office for a second and look at the notes. Robert Butts Jane's husband added some very extensive footnotes to this session.
And honestly, sometimes the footnotes are where the real gold is buried in the Seth material.
Absolutely. Robert was a meticulous record keeper, and he noticed a pattern here. A glitch in the matrix, if you will.
It explains how psychic information can be messy or distorted.
So let's rewind 2 weeks. Back to August 2nd. This was session 358. Seth makes a prediction.
He tells Jane and Robert that they're going to take a trip to Boston. And he says, specifically, that in Boston they will meet an old forgotten acquaintance and have an unusual session.
Okay, straightforward enough. Go to Boston, meet old friend, have weird session.
So Jane and Robert pack their bags. They go to Boston, they visit Star Island. They're walking around looking at the sights, and they're waiting.
Waiting for the friend.
Waiting for the friend. Waiting for the unusual session. And nothing happens.
Crickets.
They meet nobody. They have no unusual session. They come home to Elmira probably thinking, whoa, Seth missed the mark on that one.
Which happens. Even the best psychics have off days.
That's what they thought. But then 2 weeks later, they go to New York City for this Alan Burke TV show business.
They are not in Boston. They are in Manhattan.
It is the evening of August 15th.
Yeah.
The night before the meeting with the publisher, Jane and Robert are having dinner at an outdoor restaurant called the Californian. It's right on 7th Avenue.
Just a random Tuesday night dinner.
And as they're eating, a man walks up to their table.
And who is it?
It is Merle Cratsley.
The old forgotten acquaintance.
A guy they used to live with in an apartment building in Elmira years ago. A guy they hadn't seen in ages.
And let me guess, did Merle know they were there?
No, that's the kicker. Merle knew they were in New York because his wife had heard about the TV show. But he had no idea where they were staying or where they were eating.
He just happened to be walking down 7th Avenue at that exact moment.
And why was Merle in New York?
I don't know why.
He was in town specifically to see the Alan Burke Show.
No way.
Yes. He had planned to be in the audience to watch Jane.
This is incredible. So if Jane had gone through with the TV show, she would have met him at the studio. But she canceled, went to dinner instead, and still met him.
The meeting was inevitable. The location was irrelevant.
And the unusual session.
That happened the very next morning in the publisher's office, session 360, the one we just discussed. Or perhaps session 361, which they held later that day in a hotel coffee shop. Both are highly unusual locations for a trance session.
So let's break this down. Seth predicted a trip, plus an old friend, plus an unusual session, plus Boston.
And what actually happened was a trip, plus an old friend, plus an unusual session, plus New York.
So he got 3 out of 4 right, but the location was totally wrong.
And this leads Robert Butts to a profound realization about how psychic data works. He writes in the notes that psychic data is often displaced in time and space.
Displaced. Like a package delivered to the wrong house.
Or like a filing error in the mind. Imagine Seth is looking at the future. He sees the event of meeting Merle. It's a bright, glowing node of probability. And he sees a trip to a big city.
And in his mind, or in what Seth calls the spacious present, the Boston trip folder and the New York trip folder are sitting right next to each other.
Exactly. They are both tagged as upcoming trips. So when he grabs the data for the prediction, he grabs the event accurately meeting Merle, but he accidentally attaches the Boston location tag to it instead of the New York tag.
Robert says in his notes that we have to interpret this data sentence by sentence.
Right. He says, and I'm quoting Robert here, again and again it has been demonstrated to us that 2 succeeding bits of material, seemingly related, can refer to entirely different matters, separated in time and space.
This is huge for anyone interested in intuition or precognition. It means you can be 100% right about what is going to happen, but totally wrong about where or when.
It suggests that events have their own gravity. The meeting with Merle had a high intensity. It was going to happen. The universe, or the probability field, bent itself to make sure that meeting occurred, whether it was in a TV studio or a sidewalk cafe.
It's like the universe has a correction mechanism. Jane canceled the show. Fine, route the friend to the restaurant. The destination remains the same. The path just changes.
And this is where the cagey old gentleman comes back into focus, because Seth seems to be navigating these probabilities. He's surfing them.
He saw the Alan Burke disaster timeline and steered the ship away from it. He saw the Publisher Alliance timeline and steered toward it.
He isn't just predicting the future. He is curating it. He's an active participant. That's what makes him cagey. He's playing the game of reality at a level we can barely understand.
So bringing it all back to you, the listener, why does a meeting in 1967 matter to us today?
I think there are 2 massive takeaways here. The first is about trust.
Trusting your gut.
Trusting the no. Jane felt she shouldn't do the show. Logically, it made no sense to cancel. It was a career suicide move.
But she trusted that impulse.
And that impulse, guided by Seth, led her to a much deeper, more respectful relationship with her publisher.
Sometimes the wrong decision on paper is the right one if it feels right internally.
Exactly. And the second takeaway is about flexibility. If you get a flash of intuition, don't get hung up on the details.
If you think you're going to meet your soulmate in Paris and you meet them in Pittsburgh,
don't reject them because the backdrop is wrong. The event is the truth. The location is just the stage.
That is such a liberating way to look at life. The details are fluid. The emotional core is what actually matters.
And I think that's what Seth, the educator, was trying to teach them in that office. He showed them the fluidity of the future. He showed them the linen shop that hadn't happened yet. He showed them that a Boston prediction could become a New York reality.
He showed them that reality is much more malleable than we think.
Precisely. And he did it all while wearing a suit and tie, metaphorically speaking, and negotiating a book deal.
You have to respect the hustle.
You really do.
Before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that we have only scratched the surface of this session. The way Seth speaks, his syntax, his rhythm, it's hypnotic. You really need to read it for yourself to get the full cagey old gentleman effect.
The book is The Early Sessions Book 8. You can get it directly from the source at sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions.
Support the New Awareness Network. They are doing the hard work keeping this material in print.
And remember, if you do get the book, turn to session 360, August 16, 1967. Read it and see if you can feel the tension in that office.
So here is a final provocative thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. We talked about the linen shop. We talked about the left wrist. We talked about Merle Kratzley.
Where are you going with this?
Well, if Seth describes himself as a cagey old gentleman who can manipulate business decisions and foresee linen shops in Europe, where is the line between a subconscious personality and an independent entity?
That is a big question.
And if time is fluid enough that a Boston trip becomes a New York trip in a prediction, how much of your future is already written, just waiting for the right location? Is there a linen shop moment waiting for you next Tuesday?
That is the real mystery.
And if you decide to cancel your plans, like Jane canceled the TV show, does that moment disappear? Or does it just move? Does it just wait for you at a different restaurant, on a different street?
Are we writing the script, or are we just improvising our way through a play that's already been cast?
I have a feeling the cagey old gentleman knows the answer to that.
I think he does. But he might not tell us. He likes to keep us guessing.
That he does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the strange, wonderful world of the Seth Material.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Until the next deep dive, keep your eyes open. You never know when you're walking through a prediction.
Bye-bye, everyone.
See ya!